Hi, this is Adina here with this week's episode of Courage to be Curious with Adina Tovell. And soon I'm going to have to add her name to the logo, and Amy Steindler. Hi, Amy.
Hi.
In full disclosure, Amy and I are having an absolutely fantastic time, and we're hoping that you are enjoying having exchange of our voices as well in exploring courageous curiosity. If you've been following Courage to be Curious for a long time, back when it was Wonder Your Way to Brilliant, there was a lot of me in there, and there was, occasional interviews, but I really like the idea that there is like a lot of exchange going on here. And I think it's bringing a whole new richness, Amy. So I am so incredibly grateful to have my curious counterpart here.
Oh, what a delight. Thanks for having me back.
So this week we are in the love episode. So 2 weeks ago when we were here in Live, we kind of foreshadowed that we would be taking up what role do powerful questions, which is our theme for the month, play in relationship? And when we say relationship, and even though this is our love strand, we're not talking about just like spousal or, two adults in intimate relationship. We're talking about relationships. So relationships are between parents and children, and relationships are between close friends. Relationships are between spouses or partners. Relationships are really about two people who care deeply with each other, because as you may have noticed, we can love those people, but those are also the places that we tend to get into moments of greater friction, right? Amy, doesn't that happen? Like we have more friction sometimes with the people we love the most.
Absolutely. This is where our best work gets done, at least the potential for our best work gets done. The people that we love and who love us, we trigger each other, we learn from each other. It's sort of the perfect storm.
And if you listen to some of the spiritual guides, Marianne Williamson is one person who says this. There are other people have heard me say this, that it's almost like the people who are closest to us in our lives are like chosen players on our game board of life to help us to be able to grow. And we're either going to stay in a place of resistance or frustration with people around things, or we're going to open the door to let them be guides for ways that we can meaningfully grow. And that, and I think, is the fundamental reason why we keep advocating for that curiosity. Because when we get frustrated in relationships, when things keep coming up and we keep having issues with the same person, it is not because of bad intent. People are not trying to hurt each other. In fact, quite the opposite. But it means it's like something is trying to present itself as an opportunity for growth here. And we'll either take advantage of that opportunity, or we'll hold up the stop sign and say, I am willing to keep coming back to the same suffering place again and again and again, because I do not want to get curious about this.
Yeah. I think that's what keeps us from really connecting, right? Is that resistance to curiosity, that resistance to being open. It's a vulnerable place to be, right? To say, all right, I'm willing to take a look at my role in these patterns. Sometimes it's different issues with the same person. Sometimes it's the same issue with a bunch of different people, right? So, the courage and the willingness to parse that out and say, okay, what's my role? What's mine? What do I own? And to use Byron Katie's phrasing, what is my business and what is their business and what doesn't belong to either one of us, and to be able to sort of figure out who belongs to what, so that we can actually heal and work on these issues together.
I think one of the things that I almost think I couldn't say this enough in thinking about relationship work is, I think what enabled me to get past just being angry or frustrated with somebody when they were doing something that was rubbing up the wrong way was once I got a deeper understanding about the neuroscience, right? How our brain and how our minds work. And the more I delved into understanding that, the more I came to realize that each person kind of was designed with a massive operating system. But it's not kind of like, Dell or Apple or something like that, where you put out, you create. I'm looking at a MacBook Pro right now, and every MacBook Pro has the same operating system, right? So if I'm on my MacBook Pro, I can operate it. And if I go over to my daughter's MacBook Pro, I can operate it. All operates the same way. And isn't that nice and sweet and convenient? I think we live in total illusion of the fact that all humans have the same operating system. And so if I'm saying something or I'm conveying something and you're doing the opposite of what I want, well, if we have the same operating system, then you must have bad intent, because why else would you be doing that, right? And that's the illusion, the fallacy that comes, is that the beauty, the magnificence, and the challenge of it all is that we have 9 billion people on this earth, plus whatever, and 9 billion different operating systems. Mother Nature must have been so freaking busy.
Well, and add to that, I mean, it's not just the neuroscience of how we operate, because that is different for everyone. And there are people who are differently wired, which makes it even more complicated. And if you think about it, we are all the product of our experience. Every book we've ever read, every song we've ever sung, every movie we've ever seen, every conversation we've ever had, every person we've ever bumped into on the subway. I mean, all of that is different. When you add all of that up, no one has had exactly the same experience. And so we are busy all the time, speaking of neuroscience, interpreting all of that experience. And it's in that interpretation and that perspective, and I know we talked about perspective a couple of episodes ago, but that's going to come up for me all the time, because that's really what I tend to think about, is what is the perspective I'm taking on this. So when we're in a relationship with someone, when we're in a friendship, can we be a little more conscious of the perspective that we're in at the moment when someone is, let's say, annoying us, and wondering, what happens if I change my perspective on it before I go and bite that person's head off? Is there some place that I can shift that makes the annoying thing go away by itself without me wanting the other person to change? And I suspect we'll talk more about that, right? So, how we walk into a relationship, a friendship, and expect other people to change, to conform to a way that is more comfortable for us.
Yes, right. We're going to be
lot on the table.
We are. So I'm going to piece a couple of parts out. But when you were talking about all the different life experiences that we have. And the part about that is our brain literally is a web of connections, and almost like I think of them as wires. But the metaphor that came up that I've never actually used before is no two spider webs are ever exactly the same, right? It's the function of where they are, how, what twigs are they between and things like that. Are they hanging from the doorpost? And then every spider is different. So there's no two spider webs that'll ever be the same. Well, if we think about the brain as having a massive network of connections, almost like wires, they're, synapses, that they are spun over the course of us having all these experiences, smelling different things, watching different things, reading different things, encountering, each one of them is like a web being woven, and they're all different. And so we have this illusion that when we're talking with each other, that we're actually, communicating 100%. But here, and I mean, it's a fascinating thing, because I love listening to Amy communicate, and Amy, you think really differently than I do about some things. And I'm very present and aware of the fact that while you and I have very good communication, I'm only grabbing maybe about 70%, I'm grabbing the essence of what you're saying, but what's informing what you're saying is all hidden, because it comes from a totally different place. Like your curiosity comes from a totally different place. Your experience with language comes from a totally different place. So that when you make comments, I understand it enough to be able to engage in a conversation with you, but I have no illusion that I am grabbing 100% of what you intend and what your experience is behind the things that you say.
That is such an important point, right? So this is happening to everyone. There's so much that is not transparent, and we're making assumptions at all times. And, most of the time it's okay, right? Most of the time, whatever lens you're seeing it through is enough, and it works. And we understand each other and we see each other. But there will be moments in this relationship and in any other where, again, there's something doesn't quite make sense, or something triggers some emotion that is not love and respect. And those are the ones that are really interesting. Like, what's going on here? What am I missing? What have I interpreted in a way that feels painful to me? Because I'm going to use our relationship as an example. I don't think, and this is because we're in a business and a friendship kind of relationship, not a romantic one, but, there's never been a moment where I've doubted the positive intention. That everything that happens between us comes from a place of positive intent. And I think we're really lucky to have that. And I think, that's how most relationships, I don't know, I'm making this up. Most relationships might start, unless you're someone who, is constantly on guard. So I'll tell a quick story about a neighbor that I had. And I may have told this story before, so forgive me, but it just sticks with me. And her worldview and her experience was such that anyone she came in contact with, even initially, she felt like they were there to, in her words, screw her over. Mm. So she behaved in a way that kept people at a distance, and that since she was assuming they were screwing her over, she was always mad at them, like initially, and angry and dismissive and contemptuous. And so people naturally just wanted to screw her over, because it's like, who cares, right? So we have to think about, how are we entering into this thing? Are we entering into it saying, I'm going to be open and I'm going to assume positive intent and I'm going to bring my own positive intention? Or am I going to come in completely armored up because my experience is such? And, we have to say, what happened to this woman that over the course of the 50 or 60 years that had gone by created that kind of perspective for her.
Yeah. You have not told that story, so good on you that you brought it up here. And I think the point that you've made there is, what are we bringing? What's behind what we're bringing to the table in any relationship? And what difference does it make what we assume about the other person in relationship? And especially when we're in romantic relationships, I think one of the things that's so fun about romance in the beginning, and same might be true differently, but for children, but let's stick with romance for right now, is that when we're first getting to know each other, we're always assuming positive intent, and we're all actually bringing positive intent because we want to get to know the other person. We want to bring our best selves. We actually work extra hard. And that's our natural response to newness, right? There's chemicals that are involved. Oxytocin is flowing. It's bringing us into deeper connection. We want to be loved and liked. We want to put on our best, best dress kind of thing. And then over time, once there's an accumulation of experiences and maybe little hurts along the way, oh, they said something that was a little bit of a hurt or something. And particularly, and this is why I think this episode is going to be so important, Amy, is when things come up and we don't know how to manage them well, very often either things start getting swept under the proverbial carpet. I know many, many people, including myself, who had really carpets with like huge mounds. Like I wondered how the carpet could even it's not around anymore. There was such a mound of things that had just been swept under it, right? And we either sweep things under the carpet because for the sake of keeping peace in the relationship, like this is a loving relationship, I don't want it to erupt into negative things. So we sweep something under the carpet and we just keep going. So we have that response to it. Or we get fed up and we battle about things until we battle, we hurt. We invoke more injury onto each other in the process, which then makes us feel less safe. So the next time something comes up, we're much more likely to question the positivity of the intent behind something because we've hurt each other and not had a productive way to resolve that hurt.
Yes, yes, yes. And, we have to think about amygdala hijack, right? What is getting to our fear center? Is it, this fear of conflict that we want to run away from? Are we triggered in some other way that makes us want to come out fighting? How do we calm all of that down and stay curious in the moment rather than reactive? That feels like what you're talking about. How do we stay in any relationship and avoid those triggered, well, you can't avoid them, but, recognize those triggered moments and say, how can I switch from like, I'm going to get in a fight here, or I'm going to go get the broom and sweep it under the rug because I can't deal with this, and change that into, oh, wait a minute, something just happened. Isn't that interesting? What was it?
So one of the metaphors I like to use in response to this amazingly beautiful question you just asked, right? How do you do that? Like, how do we stay out of either just avoidance or the triggering back and forth and firing and things like that? How do you do the alternative, which we're suggesting is curiosity, right? How do we do that? So I always remember when I was a kid, depending on your generation, when you're listening, there was a little TV show called The Jetsons, right? Meet George Jetson, Jane, his wife. I promise I'd sing at some point. So here's my little ditty. It's not a show tune, but
I'm so happy. His boy Elroy.
Exactly. And so George, when he would get into these like conundrums, had two little characters, right, that would appear on either shoulder. And there was always one that was like egging him on, right? Egging him on to like either do the thing that you shouldn't do, like the bad boy thing, or, really get angry about something, get fired up about it. He had one who was like red and fiery in color that was always egging him on. And then in the other one, it was just sort of sitting there with like his arms crossed and George, kind of remember, and trying to keep him in a place of consciousness and keep him making better choices, right? So I like to say, don't we all have these two? We have a part of us that is going to be reactive and almost like just, yes, you poke me even a little bit, I'm going to give you a super big poke, or I'm going to run away, right? Like stay out of the poke, or like poke harder. And so we have one voice that says, don't let this happen to you. Find some way to defend yourself, either by avoidance or by fighting. And then we've got this other voice that maybe we haven't strengthened a lot. Like maybe we haven't fed that other voice a lot. And that's the voice that enables us to be able to be in a situation that maybe feels uncomfortable or threatening in some way, but to stay in a place of consciousness. And I think one of the beauties about George Jetson, right? I mean, they put the two little characters there so that we as the viewers could see the battle on the outside, because if it were on the inside, it would be harder for us to view. So they put it externally. But the externalization, I always like to say to people, what if you could be in the moment and watching yourself in the moment too? Like your higher consciousness self could watch you in that moment and guide you and say, oh, they've just said something that feels really infuriating to you. You probably think you're going to get infuriated back now and do this, but that other part of ourself that says you do have a choice here, like you've got a choice, George. You could either fire away here, or you could choose something else. And if we can, I think, embrace and imagine that our higher consciousness can be externalized a little bit and be watching over us and giving us information, we might then be able to start to develop our capacity for a different response.
I love that. And it is a practice, right? When you say develop our capacity, that happens through practice. So what's coming up for me as you're talking is that, we as a society have a lot of work to do in developing our own emotional intelligence. We're not always as emotionally literate as we could be. And I think that's part of the issue, is that, we're not good at naming emotions. We're not good at recognizing them in the moment. And I think that's a lot of what causes the tension and the conflict. So for instance, if my husband is angry, even if he's angry at me, I don't have to take on his anger in the moment. I can step back and say, wow, he's really angry. It's directed at me. Did I do something to, that warrants that kind of anger? And if I did, then it's time for me to step back and say, wow, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. And if it's not, then I need to let him just have his anger and not fix it and not, try to fight back against it because it's not mine. And so what I find happening a lot is that I'm stepping back and saying, I'm just going to let him have his emotion because it's his and he needs to feel that fully and it's not mine. And there have been times when I've been angry and he's trying to stop it. And then trying to stop it because he's uncomfortable with it, it makes it worse, right? Stop trying to stop me from being angry because I'm not done. It takes me 90 seconds and it's only been 30. So give me
my other 60.
Give me my other 60 seconds because I have to work through that. So I think, part of the process as we move into, how do we ask the questions? How do we get curious? Is also learning how to question in the moment. All right, what's happening here? Whose is this? Is this something I've done that I need to make amends for? Or is someone expressing something that I need to hold space for, that I need to be there for, that I need to just hear and see them? In the last episode, you mentioned, we just want to know that we're known, we're seen, we're heard. And so when things do get ratcheted up on the emotional scale, that's the time to say, all right, let me make some space to see this person and hear them before I come in guns a-blazing to either fight it or, make it stop because I'm uncomfortable.
That's
and
why
my discomfort.
That's why Amy is the emotional intelligence coach, right? Something that you said that I want to highlight, or maybe you hinted at it, and I want to just stretch it out a little bit further, is you talked about the person's emotion. And I'm wondering if we're able to distinguish the person's emotion from the person. Could we have an easier time holding that space when we link them together, that the emotion is the person at that moment? Then it's really hard because this person is important to us. And if this person is hurting us, that's bad. Or if they're angry, that's bad. And if we could see how that the emotion is separate, is a piece of the person, but is not the person in that moment, I wonder if that would be helpful to us to being able to hold that space better.
That is spot on. I am angry versus I feel angry, right? So we go back to language and how important the language is. So understanding when we're having our own emotions to be able to separate that for ourselves, because that's where we have to start. So can I say, I feel happy, I feel angry, I feel infuriated, I feel unseen, I feel, right? Instead of saying, no, nobody sees me, nobody understands me, I feel misunderstood. That's a whole different level. So I think you're spot on.
Yeah. And so when we were kind of thinking about, I know one of our things is that could we take these moments in our most precious relationships, see the moments of friction, not as signs that we have a bad relationship, not as signs that we're falling apart or that we should never have been together, or that you hate me, if I'm thinking about my daughter or kids or something like that, that you hate me or that you don't care about me. So if I could take all of those assumptions and toss them to the side, and I could say, oh, there is an experience of anger, frustration, sadness, upset happening right now. That's totally different. Okay, it's just something that's happening. It's not like personal, it's just something that's happening right now. These are normal things that happen to people who love each other. There is anger, there is sadness, there is frustration, there is all of disappointment, there is all of those things. These are normal experiences for humans. And then if I can take on both of those beliefs, then it's not such a far stretch to say, let me get curious about it. Let me get curious about what's causing this right now. Like, okay, you're feeling frustrated. I wonder what's causing that frustration.
Yes, and it sounds like you're talking about one of my favorite Brene Brown phrases, which is normalizing discomfort. It is normal to feel uncomfortable when things like that are going on. And when we normalize it, we're not so anxious to get rid of it and stop it. It must stop immediately. That gives us the space to ask the question. So what you're saying is, let's identify it, articulate it, have some words for it, and then we can start to ask the questions.
I was recently talking with somebody about those emotion charts. Sometimes I used to see them in doctors' offices or in kids' classrooms and things like that, that would have a chart and maybe the name of like 30 different emotions, because I do think we have a little bit of an emotional illiteracy problem, as you pointed out before, in that we don't have names for things. Most of us are, I've just experienced, many people are very removed from their feelings world. I was for a lot of years. And I would know what bad felt like and I would know what good felt like, but I couldn't give more nuanced, I couldn't identify those feelings in a more nuanced way, which made me less capable of negotiating effectively in relationship. And so I actually just talked to somebody about getting an emotions chart so that we could do what, almost like we sent those kids to do in kindergarten, go point to what you're feeling right now, go find like the face or whatever that says how you're feeling right now, because then we can have a dialogue about it. So if you're listening and you kind of have this awareness, maybe I or people in my family or people in my sphere are not as emotionally literate as we could be and would be helpful, go get yourself one of those emotion charts. Maybe we'll even link something in, a link to one that could be one of our favorites.
Well, you're laughing. I actually have one that I use with most of my clients, right? Almost every single one of my clients has seen the emotions. It's an emotions wheel. Mm-hmm. And as you get further out on the wheel, the boards get more and more nuanced. So you mentioned nuance. It's so, so important. And what's interesting about handing someone that and saying, tell me what you're feeling about that right now, is that they will pick 5 or 6 different words. So I think we want to also make people aware that when we're feeling things, we're not only feeling one thing or another. There are some moments of just unbridled joy when there's nothing but joy or when there's nothing but darkness. But for the most part, if you go around that wheel, people will pick 5 or 6 on average different emotions. So we know we're dealing with a lot of things. So my question for you is, is that where we want to go? And I'm asking a closed-end question, so I know the answer for me. But is that where we want to go for our first question? Is what is it that I'm feeling? What are all the things that I'm feeling? Before we go anywhere else, is just to ask ourselves that one question: what are all the things I'm feeling? I
do. I mean, I think that, what am I experiencing right now? Because whether I'm the one who's in the space of feeling upset or I'm on the other side of somebody else's feeling upset or whatever other nuanced feeling they're having, checking in with myself, I think it's a beautiful first step, and is, I think, what naturally happens now is, okay, what's happening right now? Because I'll have to first detect, oh, I'm feeling a little threatened right now, or I'm feeling a little accused right now, or I'm feeling a little sad about that right now. And having that awareness and that labeling of it now, as you said, kind of normalizes it in a way like, oh, okay, I'm in that emotional experience. Now I can take a next step rather than drowning in the experience because it feels so badly. As soon as I put an appropriate, accurate label to it, then it's like, oh, okay, that's one of those things, right? And now what do I do when that happens? Now I can move on to the next step.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we also have to, layer in understanding of which emotions we think are acceptable and which we don't, right? So when we are judging emotions in ourselves and other people, that's a red flag, right? That's gonna halt the process. Because we have to be able to say whatever that person's experiencing is okay. Whatever I'm experiencing is okay. So it's okay to experience anger.
So one of the things we want to get to in this episode, because this is part of our month-long exploration of the power of questions, is we want to get to this place of what are some of the powerful questions we can ask, or how do we use powerful questions in relationship? And so on our path there, one more stop I want to make, and then I want to go into that really directly, is the courage piece. That I almost think, right, the closer and more significant the relationship, the harder it feels, the scarier it feels, the more courage it requires to engage in this process. Why is that, Amy?
Well, vulnerability. It's that open heart. It's that, if I reveal myself to you, I could be hurt. And so, the practice and the build up, the preparation for it has to do with our own feelings of resilience. Do I have some place I can go, someone I can talk to, some way, some tool, some method, some process of, recovering from hurt? I think we'd love to protect ourselves from it. And there are some hurts that we absolutely need to protect ourselves from, and we can. And there are some that we don't, or we can't.
And something.
So how much do you trust yourself to be able to recover?
Yeah, I think it's so important, because what I see come up a lot with the couples that I work with is, if you're supposed to be my safe place, my safe landing pad, and then you're also this place where things feel hard or prickly or threatening, am I going to lose my safe place? And so one is, there's this like concern and worry about losing my safe landing pad. On the other hand, sweeping it under the carpet doesn't make it more safe too. And then the other piece is that I think that there is always this, a little bit of that fear in there, that if we go toward this thing, can I trust you to still love me on the other side of it? Can I trust you to love me as much or as fully as you do now?
Well, that's one of those things we can't control, right? So that's an interesting question. Why are we asking ourselves that question? But I want to go back to, you're supposed to be my safe landing pad. And I want to flag that, because in my view, from my perspective on relationships and on wholeness, you know where the safe landing pad is? It's right.
She's pointing right here into her own heart.
Yeah, it's right here. And, if you listen to Rena's podcast with us a couple of episodes ago, Rena was talking about, I found my beloved and she is me, she is me. And I think that's so important to remember, that safety and security do not come from outside. They do not come from outside. And yet we consciously and continually seek it there.
Yeah. So
let's flag that for everyone and say, if you're going to go into this practice, remember that there is no one that can 100% all the time be your safe landing pad for you.
And where you just hit the nail on the head, as you always do, Amy, right, is that our capacity, the amount of courage that we can demonstrate in going into these hard places, is often proportional to the degree in which we have already cultivated that safe landing pad inside of ourselves.
Boom. Boom. I wonder if you could say that again, but that was really good.
So just press rewind if you want to hear it again.
Right. Okay. Everybody rewind that. Go back about 30 seconds and listen to that again. That sounds so resonant to me. Yes.
Yes. And to paraphrase it again, right, that the degree to which we have both the capacity and willing to get courageous in those moments is proportional to the degree that we have found that safe landing pad inside of ourselves, that we can trust ourselves to withstand whatever might come on the other side of it, and still, feel strong and feel steady in ourselves. When we don't feel strong in that, it significantly compromises our capacity to be courageous in relationship, which also then compromises how strong that relationship is going to be over time.
Absolutely. And this brings us to the second part of your point, which is, will you still love me as much? And the question I have is, why is that so important? This is that whole, I want to please someone else. I want someone to feel a certain way about me. So therefore I have to behave in a certain way in order for them to feel that way about me. And I'm telling you, I didn't get married till I was 39 for a reason, because I spent my 20s trying to be that person that I thought the other person wanted and needed me to be in order for them to love me. So I think that's a really important point that you brought up, that we're so afraid to show ourselves because we think we'll lose someone's love. Well, if we show ourselves and they don't love us,
we didn't really have it anyway.
Okay, that's good to know, right? It's good to know that you have some reason that you cannot tolerate the parts of me that you can't tolerate. There are always going to be those parts.
So I want to bring something up, and this will lead us directly into how we use curiosity here. But, this idea that we feel vulnerable of, will you love me? And we go into people pleasing, right? I mean, what I have seen in relationships is that people pleasing is an incredible relationship killer. That the more we try, like we're almost trying so hard to make everything okay. Well, one is we're typically diminishing ourselves. We're giving away parts of ourselves every single time we just try to please someone else. If, we stop looking at ourselves, we're just like, I'm going to give, I'm going to give, I'm going to try to please, I'm going to try to please. So we're trying to make ourselves okay. We're trying to make them okay. We're typically diminishing ourselves. The other thing we're not doing when we're people pleasing, and I recently used this metaphor with somebody. I said, it's like playing pin the tail on the donkey all the time. You have a blindfold on all the time, but you just keep swirling around trying to stick tails everywhere. And it's like, I hated that game, right? It's a thankless game. Like, do you really want to play pin the tail on the donkey with a blindfold on for your entire life and relationship? But when we enter people pleasing and we don't get curious, that's what we are doing.
That's a great metaphor. I love that. And you know who loves the people pleaser, don't you? The narcissists, right? The narcissists love the people pleaser. So, be careful what you attract.
Exactly.
If you really go too far on that, you're going to be with someone that is not going to really care what you think or what you want at all.
So here's where I see the gap for people. So if I'm a listener, I'm like, okay, so you're telling me don't people please, and arguments are okay, but I don't want to spend like my whole relationship in an argument with somebody, and and I can't go around doing things to make them happy. So what are you telling me? Like, that's what I would be asking at this point. I was like, what's with you two women? Like, what's going on here? And like, what are you actually suggesting that we should do? And so I want to go to that, and I want to go to, what does courageous curiosity look like in relationship that is not about saying we should be fighting all of the time because that's, how we grow, or that, and that people pleasing, that we don't want people doing either of those. So what is the alternative to either of those, and how does that actually work? Because that's what I want to insert here. That courageous curiosity is what is in the middle, and I would say is what is at the center of my personal target board.
Absolutely. And I think that developing that skill, and it is a skill to, again, we talked about it earlier, take a step back, see what the situation is for what it is, a little bit of reality checking here. Is this person really attacking me, or are they angry about something? What is the situation? What am I experiencing? So if we say, all right, here's the thing to do. The first thing to do is to assess, right? What's happening here, and what am I feeling? So where do we go from there? If that's question number one, what am I experiencing? What am I feeling?
Then my second question is, and what are they experiencing right now? What am I noticing about their experience right now? And let's give that a name too, right? I mean, I name my feeling and experience, but I also, and you tell me whether you think we've got the order off, because we didn't pre-plan our order here. But I think the other piece is to say, what's happening in their experience. And let's, as I said, separate the experience from the person, but what's happening in their experience right now.
And how do you know? How do you know what's happening in their experience?
I don't have to get it correct. I just have to know what I'm experiencing. right? So I have to say, in the sense, and I'm going to use an example. I'll invite you to use one with maybe your husband. I'm going to use one with my daughter just so people can see it in two different lenses. So my daughter comes home, as when she was a teenager often did, and moms have this experience with teenage girls very often. I have two clients right now who are like going through this. So I'm here to help them here too. So my daughter comes home, walks through the door, and next thing I know, she's firing something at me about, well, why didn't you do this for me? You were supposed to do this. This happened at school. And she's like suddenly firing away about things that I seemingly did and had no idea. I was even in the middle of the argument in her head, right? So the first thing that's happening for me is like, wow, I feel like I'm having somebody who's firing a semi-automatic weapon at me right now. Okay, this is like what's happening right now. And I'm starting to feel myself get a little prickly. And then I'm also looking at her, and if I can say, wow, it looks like she came through the door with a lot of buildup and it's coming firing at me. I've just kind of very objectively narrated this without labeling my daughter anything. And without even saying she's like angry at me, because I know that sometimes people can be like, the child comes through like, why did you pack me that awful lunch? And like, and I needed this and you didn't have that ready for me. I mean, we've all, like, I've had that for sure, walked through the door. I had no idea even anything was going on. And next thing I know, I've been accused of 5 things. Right. And so in that moment, if I can sort of say, oh, something is happening, she's experiencing something right now, it is causing her to fire this semi-automatic weapon at me. I'm here, I'm on the other end of it. Feels a little bad to have that rifle or that barrel right in my face. And now I've at least assessed the situation in a really objective way. Because at this point, I can either start putting up my shield or I can, start firing back at her. I can make those choices, or I can take this step back, as you've said, and say, okay, she's firing away. That's not mine right now. And nor is it mine, all of the things she's firing about. This is an experience that she's having. And can I give her the space to have it right now without letting it seep into me? And that's a really, really, really hard thing to do. I don't say it like it's easy. Like, it took a lot of practice, because I went head to head with my daughter all the time for a long time. Her dad went head to head because I had a really, really strong-willed kid. She is still strong-willed, but we've all just learned to do it differently and do the dance a little differently. And so now when that happens, I say, oh, and in fact, I just described it to a client. I said, your daughter has like the little hormone demons, and sometimes they sit and kind of just like they're in hibernation or taking a nap. And sometimes the hormone demons come out and they are like having a huge freaking frat party and it looks like total chaos. It's not your daughter, it's her hormone demons who are coming out to play. And you can decide, do you want to go battling her hormone demons, or do you want to do something different? And are you battling somebody's upset? Are you battling the 6 things that might have happened at school to trigger off all of the things that my daughter has just decided are wrong in her world? And so she's now throwing out the ones that apply to me because in her head, the world is wrong in this moment. But if I can name it, here's my experience, here's what she seems to be experiencing, what are my options? That's where usually I go.
Interesting. And I think, the naming of it for ourselves is the only accurate naming we're going to get. Right. And so you're still making an assumption about her, which is probably right. And the only thing that you can probably say is she's firing a lot of stuff at me. Right. That's really the only thing that you can say. So you can't know, okay, she had a bad day, or, you can't really know anything. So I think I just want to point that out, that the only thing that you said was what was true, what was visible on the videotape. Right. So this is where we separate fact from story.
Well, I think it's on the videotape that she's upset. Where that comes from or who it's at or whatever is not visible. She looks upset. You can be
upset and anger, and you
and
just
she's
know
firing.
that words. And she's firing. That's it. And I think that's the important lesson. And that's for everyone else. I'm curious now. I'm like, wow, I wonder what's behind the firing and the upset.
Right.
So that's where the curiosity comes in. And that's what's so brilliant about this process is to say, all right, let me just stop there. That's as far as I'm going to go. I'm going to say what's happening to me. Wow, I feel like I'm being shot at. A lot of things are coming at me from that direction. Words are coming at me, and she looks upset. That's it.
And then it's interesting, Amy, because sometimes what I do is go into what you described. Again, I think it might have been the Live episode a couple episodes ago that we talked about is I might start throwing out some questions to see if any of them are resonant or to see if she's ready to answer any of them, because she may not be ready, in which case that's okay too. So I might say, honey, it seems like you're really upset. What's going on? Again, I don't know, whatever. It seems like you're really upset. I'm making my observation. What's going on? I don't fall into the trap of defending myself about the lunch I packed or whatever it is. It seems like you're really upset. What's going on? Or it might be, honey, is there something here you want to talk about, or do you just really need to let all this out right now? So I acknowledge that, like, maybe sometimes you do just need to let it out. And the funny thing is like, anybody who's listening to this who knows me well will know that my daughter actually learned that so well that now when she picks up the phone to call me, she's like, this is just a moment. I am going to say what I need to say and you just need to listen. Or this is the moment I'm going to share this and then I want your input. Like, she actually gives directions now. So I know exactly what I'm supposed to do to get it right. So it's awesome.
That's brilliant. That's so smart. It's part of a designed relationship, right? Everyone says, all right, here's what I need from you right now. God, wouldn't it be a perfect world if everyone would do that?
I think so. Like, it seems to make it so much easier to me. But so, or in that moment, I can say, wow, she's really got the gun, firing at me. I'm sort of here. I haven't had my great day myself, and maybe the best thing for me is to remove myself and I can get curious. Like, what do I need here? What do I have the capacity for right now? And I might say to her, honey, it seems like you're really upset or you've got some things to say. I'm not really in the place to kind of be taking it in right now. So I'm going to head upstairs and why don't we come back a little later? And if there's things you want to talk about, because I had to get curious about myself too. Sometimes I had the capacity to just say, okay, I can be here, take the firing and see what you need and be totally curious about you. But sometimes I don't have that capacity because I'm compromised in some way. And I'm a very firm believer, Amy, in that whole, when you're on the plane, put the oxygen mask on yourself first. That if I know that I'm compromised in some way, take care of me first. Don't try to pull it out and take care of somebody else, because I guarantee you, I know myself, I'm going to screw it up. I'm going to end up in the battle. I'm going to end up fighting. I'm going to end up taking it personally. I'm going to end up screwing it up in a million ways. So instead, take care of myself first and say, in that moment, being curious about myself is like, what do I have the capacity for right now? I don't really have the capacity to be the one who can show up and be conscious in this moment. So let me take myself out of here and say, I don't know what's happening. I know that right now, this isn't really a good moment for me to be on the other side of it. I'm going to head off. And if we need to talk about it, we can come back later.
I love that. I think that's so important. And again, it requires a bit of pre-design, I think, because if I were to hear that, and I didn't know that that was part of our relationship, that was within the structure of our relationship, I could get triggered by that. Maybe that's just me personally, thinking someone's refusing to help me now. Someone's refusing to be with me now.
I think
that mean something.
I think that could happen, and I'm okay with that. I think people could very easily assume that, but the question is, do I go into this space, continue in this space in a compromised way where I can't really be curious and open, or do I not? And if they get triggered about it, maybe that's just part of the natural unfolding. And so I've decided for myself personally, I'm willing to let that other person feel triggered by my statement, because I got to put my oxygen mask on first, and I'm doing it in the best, most gentle way I can, even if it may not be received that way. And then we can come back. So I do realize that some people could get triggered. And I've decided for me, I'm okay with that, because right now between the two of us, if I try to stay in it when I can't, it's not going to go well.
No, I think we're in violent agreement here. I think the only point that I'm trying to make is if you are working on a relationship and you really want to make it, be present for each other. to design that in and say,
Yes.
let's talk about what happens to us, what we do as a couple or as parent-child in situations where I don't have the capacity to hold space for whatever it is that you need. When I can't be there for you, right? When I can't be your safe landing pad, how are we going to do that? What are the words that I'll say? I will say, I don't have the bandwidth right now to be fully there for you. Can I go upstairs and we'll meet again later? So what I'm suggesting is you take that a step further and you absolutely set those boundaries, and you set the boundaries for the boundaries. How will the boundaries look? What will it sound like?
Right. And I think absolutely. And I have couples who they have like their proverbial reset button, when they've kind of both not acted well, and they're like, what if we just do a rewind or do a reset? And then they both agree to do a reset on something so that they can come back. So I think I love it, right? 100% right. That having pre-designed cues, and with my daughter and I, right, she didn't just get to sort of giving me, we talked about that. I said, honey, it'd be so much better if you told me exactly which role you want me to play right now. If you gave me my what is it, stage notes, my instructions, then I could do this much better. So why don't you give me the stage instructions and then I'll know. And so yes, doing it by design is amazing. At the same time, then, going back and saying, what was happening for you there? Was that about me or was that about something else? Because I want to get to the part of this conversation too, where we do talk about like getting courageously curious. Notice that I didn't ask about the lunch and I didn't ask about the thing I didn't buy for her on time. I didn't ask about any of those things because that's actually the distraction. People don't get that violently upset about, the wrong lunch. And I think that's an important thing to know, that most of the stuff we fight about are just sort of like, it's the thing, the object that is absorbing whatever the bigger experience is, and it's coming through that way, but it's not actually about the thing. People don't fight like that about lunches or things like that. They fight because there's some other bigger experience and it just comes out in those terms. And so when I go to her, I'm not going to ask her about the lunch. I'm not going to ask her about the thing I didn't buy. I'm going to say, what was going on for you there? I would like to know. And, if there was something that was about me, I'd like to know about that. If there was something else that was going on. And in doing that, I feel like the attempt is to open up the conversation, but it's also attempting to help her become more conscious and self-aware of herself.
Well, that's the key, right? And I think this brings us back to the emotion wheel, right? This is, let me identify and articulate what I'm feeling and ask you to do the same. In order for me to see you and understand you and hold this space for you or be your safe landing pad, help me understand what it is that you're feeling. And so that's when you go back to her, that's basically what you're asking. What are you feeling? What's your experience?
So if I could, if I were to say, oh my gosh, I want every single couple I've ever worked with or will work with or have worked with to listen to this episode, right? I would want them to sort of take in what you just said, is that if we could stop fighting about the dishwasher or the laundry or the toilet seat or the toothpaste or all of those things, because those are not actually argument worthy things. And they're usually just masquerading or serving as covers for the other things that are more important. And if we could stop and say, what's really happening for you? What's really going on? What might not be feeling right for you? And if we could answer beyond the toothpaste cap and beyond the toilet seat, recognizing that those are not really argument worthy things. And that's not really what's causing our hurt. And we could be willing to look a little bit more deeply. Then I feel like people could start having conversations that would meaningfully grow their relationships.
Absolutely. What you're saying is, what I'm hearing you say is that we are all responsible for our own emotional states. In that way, I am asked to take responsibility for how I feel, right? The toothpaste is not responsible for how I feel. Right? The wrong sandwich is not responsible for how you feel. And I think that's again, as we're designing these relationships and talking about how do we have a successful relationship, how do we show up fully and own what's ours? The biggest thing we have to own is our own emotional state, our own emotional response. There could be a triggering event. I mean, there's Martha Beck calls it clean pain and dirty pain, right? Clean pain is someone dies of a heart attack. You're sad, you miss them, you're grieving, you're despondent, it hurts. Dirty pain is, I shouldn't have let him eat that bacon. It's all my fault. I should have made him go and get his, go to his cardiologist sooner. So the stories that we layer into the pain that make it kind of dirty. So we want to separate those things and say, I don't want to own putting the wrong sandwich in the bag, because that's not what's happening here. I will own feeling a little surprised and confused about why the automatic weapon is aimed my way. But I can kind of work through that by saying, okay, I feel it. Let me check in with this other person to see why they're so not just armored up, but on the attack.
And I think the last thing I would want to bring, as we're coming to the end of this session is, in the deck that we have a Love with the Courage to Be Curious card deck, right? And that deck is divided into two parts. Half of them are questions that get to self-love, like cultivating and becoming aware of, the love of self. And the other are, how can I love somebody else well? And the way those questions were designed was, they're phrased like this, like, what does my partner need when they feel most sad? What are the three things that make my partner, or the person I care about, it's actually phrased, the person I care about, feel most loved? We make a lot of assumptions. We have this ground illusion that if there's love between two people, that there's also completely accurate mind reading between two people, right? we equate those two things. I remember the first coach I worked with, I think I even had one session with her. And when she pointed that out to me about my relationship with my dad, so she basically said, so you expect that he is to be a mind reader and know exactly what you're thinking and feeling so he can respond in exactly the perfect way. And I was like, huh. Yes, I guess that's what's actually happening. And so we equate love with expertise and mind reading. And unfortunately, I need to say, because those spider webs are so different and the operating systems vary from person to person, is that there is no mind reading, even in the closest of relationships. And maybe I want to postulate that's even a good thing, because if we could feel after a year or 2 years or 5 years that we knew everything about that person, they wouldn't be interesting anymore. So let's keep them interesting, but interesting means that we have to stay curious about them. And the questions in that deck are specifically designed to, what might I be asking to understand the invisible things that are part of my person that I care about's operating system? Because as I learn more about those things, then yes, I can show up in ways that are really going to help to match or be supportive of those and be loving in ways that feel loving to them.
Absolutely. Yeah, that whole mind reading piece is a real head scratcher. I mean, I've heard people say, well, he should know. He should know that I don't like that. He should know that I don't want that. And that idea of someone should know something. And if that's what's triggering you, that's on you, my friend, not on them. Right? It's up to you to be able to be honest and say, here's what I need in those situations.
So I'm going to ask the same question I asked at the end of the Live Such episode, which is, if there was one thing, like one nice, juicy, beautiful idea you would like people to take from this session as they think about getting courageously curious in relationships, what would that be?
I want them to take away that responsibility for their own emotional states, right? Get your emotions charts and use them. Just know how you're feeling, because that's where it all starts. If you know how you're feeling, what you're feeling, and you separate that, I think your point earlier was so important. It's not who you are, it's what you're feeling in that moment. And so be able to separate those things. I'm not an angry person. I'm just feeling angry right now.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think, for me, it builds on what you've just said, is that if we can experience ourselves both as in situations, but also as observers of that situation, then we can become really skillful. We can start to become courageously curious because we're not so engulfed by the experience. We have a little bit of appropriate distance to be able to observe the experience and therefore to make more conscious, mindful, and curious choices.
I love that. And I think the intention to be curious, the intention to sit with it and think, what is the question that I could ask that could help me know this person better, or help me see them more clearly?
So we are in the month of thinking about the power of questions. And if you are getting even the least bit curious, you can find out more about these card decks we've been talking about on the Courage to Be Curious website at couragetobecurious.com. You can also find them at live-lead-love-courageously.com and begin to play with your own sets of questions. And I also want to invite you back for the final episode. We've been talking this month on the power of questions. We've been talking about the fact that we are having the authors of Ask Powerful Questions, Create Conversations That Matter. Last week, you heard from one of the authors, Will Wise, in our leadership episode. And next week, we are going to have Chad Littlefield, who is a hoot. I mean, I've watched him on videos, had a little bit of exchange, but full of energy, a master of creating opportunities for connection in ways that really matter. So I am super excited to be on with him. Amy will be on for that episode as well. We're going to be having a lot of fun playing. So great one to watch on YouTube if you get the opportunity. And if you're still reading the book, maybe you didn't have an opportunity to finish it before Will came on, but you now have, and you want to send me a question that you want me to ask of Chad, then go ahead and send it to me at info@couragetobecurious.com. And thank you for continuing to listen to Courage to Be Curious with Adina Tovell. The ways that you can help this show to grow are by reviewing it on iTunes and by sharing it with friends and family. They can become part of our community on Facebook, the Courage to Be Curious page, follow us on Instagram, but please make sure that you're bringing the people that you care about, who you feel like would really resonate with the messages that we're sharing. We love that word now, and share it with them. So thank you, Amy, for again being part of this dynamic conversation. Love being here with you.
Thanks. Love being here with you.
And we'll see you again next week.